The first time they called her a fool was when she stepped out of the burning cabin with a baby in her arms, wrapped in ash-covered deerskin, no older than a week, and clearly not hers. Clara Hale didn't flinch when old man Barrett spat at her boots or when Miss Granger crossed the street with her nose in the air. She just pulled the shawl tighter around the child and walked straight through town like her name had weight. It didn't. Not yet. They whispered that it was a Redskin's baby, left behind after the raid that took her brother's life and burned her family's home to splinters. Maybe it was. Clara never asked. She'd found the child half buried under the smoking remains of her brother's corn crib, whimpering through lips chapped from thirst. She didn't know whose arms had carried him there, or why they'd left him alive. But something in his cry pierced through her like a promise. So she lifted him, soot and all, and called him Jonah. Sheriff Morton had warned her. "You bring trouble keeping that one. Folks already angry, scared." "I don't care what they are," Clara had replied, cradling Jonah close. "He was alone. I'm not leaving him that way." By the end of the week, she'd lost her job at the boarding house. Miss Claymore didn't think it proper to keep a woman with unsettled instincts. The landlord gave her a month's notice. Children were told not to play near her porch. But Clara never sent the baby away. She traded her silver locket for goat's milk, cleaned laundry for riflemen along the edge of the valley trail. Jonah grew quieter, stronger. He stopped whimpering at night and started following her voice with his wide, dark eyes. It wasn't until the day she found a painted symbol on her doorpost, a hawk wing, drawn in red clay, that Clara knew someone had been watching. Not from town, from beyond, from the trees. That night she kept the lantern burning late, and when the knock came just past midnight, it wasn't the sheriff. It was a man tall as the doorway, wrapped in animal skin and silence, with eyes like coal and wind. He looked at the child asleep in her arms, then at her. "You took him?" he asked, voice thick with both fury and something else, something close to awe. "I did," Clara said, standing her ground. "He had no one." "You are wrong," the man said. "He has a tribe, and now—" "Maybe so do you." The man didn't move. He stood in the doorway with the stillness of someone used to silence and storms, as though both had shaped him. Clara kept her back straight, the baby pressed gently to her chest. She didn't know if he'd come to take Jonah or to punish her for keeping him, but she wasn't handing him over to anyone without a fight. "You his father?" she asked. The man shook his head once. "His uncle. I am Crowfire, of the Tall Elk people." She nodded slowly. "I'm Clara Hale. The child. I didn't know who he belonged to." Crowfire stepped inside, his boots quiet on the warped floorboards. He moved like wind through pine, present but never too loud. "You fed him goat's milk," he said, glancing at the small clay bowl on the table. "And buried the others." Clara's throat tightened. "Yes, I buried your people with my brother. I didn't know their names." Crowfire closed his eyes, just for a moment, then opened them again. "You honored them better than most whites ever would." She didn't respond. What was there to say? Grief didn't care what color skin covered it. He looked at the child, then knelt down beside her slowly, like someone taming a wild animal. Jonah stirred in her arms, but didn't cry. "He is the son of my sister," Crowfire said. "She died giving birth during the fire. I was too late." "I'm sorry," Clara said. "He would have been taken by the flames had you not carried him away." She looked down at Jonah. His face was peaceful, small fingers curled against the edge of her shawl. "I couldn't leave him." Crowfire rose. "The people who drove us out, your people, would have let him die." "They're not my people," she said sharply. "Not anymore." He studied her for a long moment. You live alone? I do now. He glanced around her small home. The firewood stacked neatly, the washed linens, the pale green herbs drying in bundles above the hearth. You care for him like blood. I've got none of that left, she said. Crowfire turned toward the door. I will return. You may not believe this, Clara Hale, but there are still those among us who watch from the trees, and they have seen what you've done. She stepped forward, heart racing. You're not going to take him? He paused at the threshold. You saved a child of the valley. That makes you part of it now, whether you meant to be or not. And then he vanished into the night, leaving her with only Jonah's quiet breath and 100 questions that didn't yet have answers. 3 days passed without another sign of Crowfire, and Clara began to wonder if she'd imagined him, if grief, loneliness, and exhaustion had woven a ghost out of midnight in memory. But on the 4th morning, she saw smoke on the northern ridge. Not wildfire. Not a settler's cook fire either. It was a signal, thin and deliberate, rising in straight columns against the pale sky. She held Jonah close and whispered, "They're still out there, aren't they?" By noon, she heard horses. Not from the ridge, but from town. Amos Thatcher and 2 of his ranch hands came thundering up her dirt path, dust rising in angry plumes behind them. Amos dismounted like a man who didn't believe in knocking. You got visitors, Hale, he said, not smiling. You ought to be careful who you keep company with. Clara didn't answer. Jonah stirred in her arms. Amos stepped closer. Folks saw tracks, moccasin tracks, and that little symbol on your door? Some say it's an invitation, that you're asking them to come back. I didn't ask for anything, she replied. I saved a child. That child's a Redskin. You want to raise one of them? Fine. But don't expect the rest of us to protect you when they come back to finish what they started. They didn't start it, she snapped. You lit the fire when you stole their hunting grounds and fenced off the river. Amos's eyes darkened. You forget your place, Clara. You're no better than them now. She looked him square in the face. I never was. He spat near her boot. Don't come crying when you're left with nothing. When they were gone, Clara sat by the fire and tried not to shake. Jonah looked up at her with wide, trusting eyes. She kissed his forehead and whispered, You're not nothing. That night, the knock came again, but this time it was softer. When she opened the door, a girl stood there. Maybe 12 years old, barefoot, with braids as long as her back. She held out a bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside, a finely carved rattle made of bone and sinew. The council sends this, she said, for the child, and for you. Clara knelt down. Why? Because you fed him before yourself, the girl said, and you buried the fallen. Clara took the gift with trembling hands. What's your name? Moon in Sky. Will I see you again? The girl smiled faintly. If they let me. And just like Crowfire, she disappeared into the night, leaving behind only a token, and a flicker of hope Clara hadn't dared to feel in years. By the end of the week, Clara's porch looked like a trading post. Someone had left a satchel of dried herbs. Another had hung a small clay charm above her door shaped like a hawk's wing. The same symbol Crowfire had drawn. The town didn't speak to her, but it watched. Whispers followed her to the well. Doors closed a little faster when she passed. Still, she held her head high. Jonah always nestled close, his tiny hands gripping her apron as though he knew the world already called him a burden. One morning, as the sun broke over the valley, Sheriff Wilkes arrived. He was older than most, his belly soft from years of comfort, but his eyes were sharp. He removed his hat as he approached her porch, boots creaking on the steps. Clara met him outside with Jonah in her arms. Miss Hale, he said, voice even. I'm here as a friend, not a badge. Friends usually don't lead with that, she replied. He sighed. I've had 3 complaints this week. Townsfolk say you're harboring a savage child and consorting with the tall elk. I haven't consorted with anyone, she said, unless giving a baby milk and warmth is some kind of crime now. Wilkes nodded toward the bundle of herbs hanging by her window. They say the tribe's marking your house as one of theirs. Maybe it's the only home they've seen show mercy. Mercy's expensive out here, Clara, he said gently. You've already lost your brother. Don't risk your own life trying to save what this town will never understand. Her jaw tightened. Then the town will have to learn. The sheriff paused. I know Amos. He's not done. He wants to run you out or worse. If he pushes this to the council, they could declare you unfit. Take the boy. He's not a stray dog, she snapped. They don't get to take him. Law's thin in these parts, Clara. You're alone. She glanced past him at the tree line, where she swore she saw movement. Just a flicker of fabric, maybe, or shadow. I don't think I am. Wilkes followed her gaze, then looked back. They watching you? Maybe. Maybe they're watching the boy. You trust them? She nodded. More than I trust the men who lit the fires. The sheriff studied her for a long moment, then stepped down from the porch. You've got a spine, I'll give you that. Just be careful, Clara. Mercy paints a target out here. As he rode off, Jonah began to hum, a low, wordless tune he'd never made before, like he was remembering something older than he could explain. And Clara, heart-pounding, hummed right back. Clara woke before dawn to the scent of smoke, but not from fire. It was the dry, sweet kind that came from cedar and sage, and it drifted through the open window like a prayer. She stepped onto the porch in her boots and nightdress, Jonah still asleep in the crook of her arm. At the edge of the yard stood 3 figures, Crowfire, Moon in Sky, and a third she hadn't seen before. An old woman draped in elk hide, her gray braids reaching her waist, her face carved with deep, still lines. Clara didn't speak. She just waited. Crowfire stepped forward first. We asked to speak. Come in, Clara said, but the old woman shook her head. Outside is better. The wind tells truth. Clara nodded and sat on the porch bench, swaying Jonah gently. The old woman came close enough for her eyes to be seen. Dark, unreadable, but not unkind. She is Mother of Rivers, Crowfire said, one of the valley's oldest voices. She speaks for our council. Clara waited. Mother of Rivers spoke slowly. We watched when you took the child. We waited to see if it was for pity or pride or payment. It was not. You asked for nothing. You gave warmth. You sang. I only did what any decent soul should, Clara replied. Few do, said the elder. Most leave what they do not understand to die. Moon in Sky stepped forward, holding a folded piece of doeskin, painted with symbols. We brought a name, she said. Not to take him, but to give him. Clara unfolded the skin. A single word in red ochre. Tahuna. He who was carried from ash. He belongs to both now, Mother of Rivers said. To your hands and to our memory. If you will allow, we offer this. Come to our valley. Live with us through the next moon cycle. Let the child hear the language of his blood. Let us know the woman who carried him through fire. Clara blinked. You want me there? We want the child, but we will not tear him in 2. You may come, or you may stay. But know this, our protection reaches farther than most eyes can see. Crowfire added, If you remain, we will mark your land. None of our hunters will cross it. But those who would harm you, they'll see the mark and think twice. Clara looked at Jonah, then at the painted skin in her hands. I don't know your ways. You know mercy, said the old woman. That's enough to begin. Clara nodded slowly. Then I'll come. The three nodded once. No smiles, just understanding. As they left, Moon and Sky turned back. "Bring the baby, and your stories." And Clara realized, for the first time in years, someone wanted her not just as shelter, but as part of something bigger. Clara packed light, just what she could carry on her back and in the saddlebag. A wool blanket, dried bread, her brother's old knife, and the bone-carved rattle Moon and Sky had gifted them. She left a note on the door in case the sheriff came calling. "Gone for a time. The boy is safe. That should be enough." Then she wrapped Jonah to her chest, mounted the aging bay horse Crowfire had brought her the night before, and rode toward the eastern ridge where the valley opened like a secret. The path into the tall elk land was narrow and shrouded, flanked by cedar and pine, bird call and quiet wind. Clara kept one hand on the reins and one resting lightly on Jonah's back, humming the tune he'd taken to sleeping with. He didn't cry, not once. Maybe he remembered the air. Or maybe, she thought, he just knows he's not alone anymore. At the crest of the ridge, Crowfire waited. He nodded, then turned his horse without a word. They rode side by side in silence, descending into a world Clara had never seen. Wide meadows kissed by morning mist, streams so clear she could see minnows dart beneath the surface, and distant smoke spiraling from earth lodges tucked against the hills. When they reached the village, no one shouted. No one stared. Children peeked from behind fur-draped tents, and elders nodded as she passed. It wasn't welcome in the way of banners or cheering, but something deeper. "We've seen you. We've decided you may stay." Moon and Sky ran up to greet them, took Clara's hand, and led her to a low tent with painted hides and soft moss piled near the door. "This is for you," she said, "just for now, until you know our steps." That first night, Clara didn't sleep much. She lay with Jonah against her chest, listening to the village breathe. Fires popping, drums low in the distance, voices soft and rhythmic in a language she couldn't follow but felt in her bones. She dreamed of fire again, but this time she wasn't running from it. She was carrying something through it. Not just the child, herself, her worth, her choice. In the morning, the women came. 3 of them. They brought herbs, tools, and a small woven pouch. One placed her hand over Clara's heart and said, "You are not just keeper. You are mother now." And though no lawman would have recognized it, no preacher would have signed it, the tribe's word bound deeper than any parchment. Jonah, now called Tahuna, belonged. And so, for the first time since her brother died, so did Clara Hale. By the second week, Clara knew how to grind roots for salves, how to tie a baby sling from deer hide, and how to ask for water in the tall elk tongue. She knew that Crowfire's mother wept in private when she held Jonah, and that Moon and Sky braided her hair each morning not out of duty, but affection. There was no judgment here, just memory, tradition, and the quiet healing of presence. She hadn't realized how much noise shame made until it was gone. Jonah, Tahuna, thrived. His skin no longer looked too pale or too dark in the wrong way. It just looked like his. His legs grew stronger, his gaze brighter. One afternoon, while she bent to wash a pot in the stream, he reached out and grabbed a fish with 2 clumsy fingers, then squealed in delight and flopped back into her lap. And that's when it happened. He laughed. It wasn't much at first, just a hiccup of joy, half choked on surprise. But then it came again, round and clear, like bells in a church tower. Clara froze. The pot slipped from her fingers, splashing water across her skirt. She stared at him. He laughed again. And she laughed too, so hard her ribs ached, so deep it startled nearby birds from the reeds. She pulled him tight and kissed his forehead a dozen times. "You sound like the sky when it breaks into rain," she whispered. "Thank you for that." That night, they held a fire gathering. Not for Jonah, not for her, just because it was time. But the drumming was deeper, the voices stronger. Clara felt it in her chest, like she was humming without making sound. Crowfire sat beside her, watching Jonah sleep. "He has your eyes now," he said. "No," Clara said, smiling. "He has his own." Crowfire nodded. "They laugh less since you came, but better, deeper, like they trust again." She watched the flames. "I don't know if I deserve this. I didn't grow him inside me. I didn't even know who he was when I pulled him from the ashes." "You didn't have to," Crowfire said. "You chose him anyway." Clara's throat tightened. She looked at the sleeping baby, at the soft rise and fall of his chest. "You know," she whispered, "I think I chose me too." Above them, sparks lifted into the night sky like silent prayers. Around them the village beat its rhythm. Within her, something long buried finally felt heard. She hadn't just carried a child through fire. She'd carried herself into belonging. The rains came early. Not the soft kind Clara had grown used to in the valley, but harsh, wind-laced downpours that soaked the ground and bent trees sideways. Most stayed indoors. Fires burned low in every lodge, and the drumming ceased for days. Clara tucked Jonah tight against her chest as the world darkened outside the hides. But when the clouds broke on the fourth morning, someone new stood at the edge of the village. He wore settler's boots and a slick brown coat. His beard was trimmed, his rifle slung across his back too casually for a hunter. Clara saw him first, stepping from the healer's lodge with a pot of boiled roots in her hand. He stood like someone who wasn't used to waiting. Crowfire approached him slowly, spear in hand, though not raised. The man didn't move. His eyes locked onto Jonah the moment Clara stepped into view. "You Clara Hale?" he asked. She didn't answer. Not yet. "I came from Dalton," he continued. "Name's Harris. I work for Judge Billings. You got yourself a problem." Clara squared her shoulders. "Speak plain." He pulled a folded paper from his coat. "Petition's been filed. Local council back in town's calling for an emergency hearing. Says you've taken an Indian child under false pretenses. Says the boy belongs to his people, and you ain't one of them." Crowfire stepped forward, voice low and tight. "She has been invited. She has been named." The man didn't blink. "Not in Dalton, she hasn't. They want the boy brought in, and the woman. You're to come before the judge in 3 days' time." Clara felt something twist in her stomach. Jonah whimpered, sensing her tension. "I'm not taking him anywhere near that town," she said. "If you don't come," Harris said, "they'll send someone who won't ask first. And those types, they don't care much about firelight or stories, just orders." Clara looked at Crowfire. His jaw was set, his hand clenched around the shaft of his spear. "I'll go," she said quietly. Crowfire turned sharply to her. "You owe them nothing. But if I stay, they'll come here, and I won't let this village burn because of me. I've seen what fire takes." She turned back to Harris. "Tell the judge I'll be there, but I don't come alone." Harris gave a shallow nod. 3 days. When he left, the council gathered around her. No one told her not to go. They simply began preparing her for a battle not of weapons, but of words and silence, and a mother's claim that ran deeper than blood. The courthouse in Dalton smelled of old wood, wet coats, and tension. Clara sat at the center of it all, her boots muddy from the road, her shawl damp around her shoulders, and Jonah asleep in her arms. Beside her stood Crowfire, straight-backed and silent, dressed in his formal elk-hide tunic. His presence drew stares like open wounds. But he didn't flinch. Judge Billings tapped his gavel once. "Miss Clara Hale, you've been summoned under Article 12C, unlawful custody of a native-born child without kin or civic sanction." Clara raised her chin. "I didn't take him. I found him. Carried him from fire." Councilman Amos Thatcher leaned forward from the benches, lips tight. "You're not his blood, Hale, and you're not fit to raise him. The boy deserves a proper life." "With who?" Clara snapped. "You? The ones who let his mother burn?" The room rustled with discomfort. The judge narrowed his eyes. "Control yourself, Miss Hale." Crowfire stepped forward. "The boy is of my bloodline, my sister's son. His name is Tahuna. He has been welcomed by my people, raised with warmth, fed with honor." Amos stood. "Then take him. But not her. A white woman with no husband and no ties has no place in your camp and no rights to an Indian child." Judge Billings looked at Clara. "Is that true, ma'am? Do you claim this child as your own?" Clara stood. The courtroom suddenly felt very quiet. "I do," she said. "I didn't birth him, but I bled for him. I gave up my home, my standing, and everything comfortable I ever had. I chose him when no one else did." She reached into her satchel and pulled out the painted deerskin with his tribal name. She held it high. "His name is Tahuna. It means he who was carried from ash, but it also means he who was not left." The judge blinked slowly. "And you'd raise him in the tribe, not among your own?" "I have no own," she said, voice trembling, "but I've been fed by their hands, protected by their fire, and taught to listen by their women. I didn't just find a child. I found a people who remember what it means to belong." The judge glanced at Crowfire, then at the boy, then at Amos, whose face had turned crimson. He sighed, leaned back in his chair and muttered, "God help us all." Then louder, "The court recognizes the tribe's claim, and Miss Hale's guardianship, so long as the child is raised in peace." Crowfire bowed his head. Clara wept silently, one hand resting over Jonah's heart. For once, justice had listened. And it had named her, too. Spring returned to the valley in slow, gold-laced waves. Snow melted along the riverbank, swelling streams until they sang louder than the drum beats. Children ran barefoot through the thawing fields, chasing clouds and birds and dreams. Clara stood at the edge of the village now, not as a guest, not as someone watched from a distance, but as one of them. Her shawl had been traded for a woven cloak. Her hands bore the small scars of work, and her voice carried the lilt of both languages now. Jonah, still Tahuna to the tribe, toddled beside her, legs wobbly but determined. When he fell, he laughed. When he cried, he reached for her first. He didn't question who she was. She was Mother, and that was enough. The council had given her a name weeks ago. They spoke it only during ceremony, but it reached her ears like thunder on a warm night. Tsena Waya, the one who returned with flame. She hadn't known what to do with that at first. She hadn't returned with vengeance, only with stubbornness, and a baby wrapped in her coat. But the old women had whispered it with such reverence that eventually she began to whisper it back to herself, not as a title, but as a promise. One evening, Moon and Sky approached her with a small, carved object in hand. It was a medallion made of polished stone, etched with the mark of the valley, the hawk wing, the stream, and beneath it, a mother's arms. "It is yours now," the girl said. "You belong here." Clara took it, fingers trembling. "Why me?" "Because no one else stood in the fire." That night, Clara sat with Jonah in her lap, beneath the stars. Crowfire joined her after a time, his presence quiet and familiar. "He'll never remember the town," she said softly, rocking Jonah against her. "He'll never know the stairs or the threats, only this." "Good," Crowfire replied. "Let the valley shape him. Let him remember you in every shadow, every warmth." They watched the stars together for a long while. Then Crowfire stood and, without a word, placed a bundle of cedar branches at the entrance to her lodge, a sign, she now knew, of eternal protection. The next morning, as the sun crested the eastern hill, Clara walked with Jonah toward the planting fields. A few of the younger women waited there, and when they saw her coming, they stepped aside, not out of fear, not from obligation, but to make room. "Welcome, Mother of the Valley," one of them said. And Clara smiled, the kind of smile that only comes after being found. Please like, share, and subscribe to support more true-hearted stories on Native Western Tales. If you had seen her there, would you have stepped in too? Tell us in the comments.